I'm Eric Lipsy, and this is Galt University. Today I'm here again with Amy. How are you today?
Hi, Eric. I'm great. How about you?
I'm outstanding. Amy Show coaching, I guess I should always mention that part because that's very important to to the whole thing, the qualifier, right? Well, today we're here to talk about managing your mindset. And maybe we can start by talking about why that is so important.
Of course, Eric, and that's a great question. And I think that's especially an important question because, especially as business owners, we tend to put ourselves and our mindset set last because we're working on keeping our employees going if we have them, keeping all the moving parts of our business going, and forgetting that we as the business owner are really the driver, we're the engine of our business. So the reason why managing your mindset is so important is because your thoughts have a direct correlation to the results that you create. And that can be in business, it can be in your personal relationships, any area of your life. So it's important to pay attention to what's going on in your head and what kind of mindset you are cultivating or not cultivating so that you can put yourself in a direction and on the trajectory of the results that you actually want to create instead of just leaving that up to chance by ignoring your mindset.
Mhm. Now, with the mindset, there are different stages you go through with entrepreneurship. There's seems like there has to be a mindset for when you're getting started, a mindset for when you're in the process, when you're having all the different challenges, because there's one thing to be in the idea stage of a business and then moving into the implementation and rollout of a business. And then there's even a part where you become successful, you've achieved some success. Then there's that mindset there. So maybe we could talk about just breaking these up in segments and maybe talk about a little bit the mindset for even getting started with your business because I imagine it's just different.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, at every stage of business, um, you are going to encounter specific challenges, including with your mindset. And one thing that I would offer is that at every stage of business, moving your business forward requires you to grow your mindset, grow your belief in yourself and your own capabilities in your business. So right at the start of building a business, um, you know, I myself have been a baby business owner more than once, and there's a lot of uncertainty at that stage. And I have met so many people who are really enthusiastic about wanting to create something great, wanting to be successful, and saying, just give me the instructions and tell me what to do, and I'll do it. This is one of the tricky things about mindset as a new business owner, or really at any stage when you're innovating, creating a new product in your business, is that what worked for one business owner
Mhm,
isn't necessarily going to work for you. What got one person results won't necessarily be your path
mhm.
as to success as a business owner. And so we get into a lot of what we refer to as how greed, meaning I just want to know how. Tell me
Mhm.
the how and I'll do it. But especially with entrepreneurship, you don't know your how until you've gotten there. You don't know what tactics and strategies will be successful to you until you implement and learn and adjust, right? And so I think as a beginning business owner, um, in that startup phase where everything is new, you don't have a roadmap to success, just being open to trusting yourself that you will find your path and having the self-confidence to know that no matter what comes up as a result of the tactics and strategies that you try, you're going to have your own back, you're going to have your business's back.
Yes, absolutely. And I really like one of the things you mentioned there is that what I call the cookie cutter strategy. Because and I think it's really commendable that you're sensitive to that because I've talked to a lot of coaches and people who have been coached and they're like, oh well, this company did this and you should be able to go do this because they did this. It's like a lot of times you don't understand what that person's situation is, where I know entrepreneurs who come out, they have no support system, they barely have any money or no money, and they're trying to build a business versus someone who is coming out where they have support of their family, they have support, they have money that is behind them, where they have thousands of dollars, where $10,000 seem like no money to them. A next person might be like, oh man, if I just had $1,000, I could do XYZ. So you get people into these different situations, and based on your situation, you basically have to have a different formula for what it is you're trying to achieve, because your formula can't be their formula, like you said before, because you don't have that same you don't have the same assets. So your formula needs to fit your what you have to bring to the table.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think of entrepreneurship as forging a new path through the woods, right?
Mhm.
Somebody can give me a great route and tell me exactly how to do it, exactly how to clear the trees or whatever. But the roots and the rocks and twists and turns that I'm going to encounter forging my path are going to be completely different than theirs. So they
Yeah.
can give me some basics, but it's up to me as a business owner to forge my own way, look at the obstacles and opportunities that are presented uniquely to me,
Mhm.
and adjust for them, pivot when I need to, according to who I am and who the business is that I'm trying to build.
Yes, absolutely. And it just what you said bring to mind a situation where I was talking to this guy. He had developed this app that was so for trucking companies or whatnot. And one of the things he was trying to figure out was how does he get these trucking companies to, one, be aware of what he is doing and to use what he's doing. And then I started thinking initially, because I do a little consulting on the business side myself, so it's I'm I'm thinking along the lines of what I've had to do with different challenging times of getting a product out there, getting in front of the right people, and that sort of thing. But his situation isn't my situation because he's dealing with trucking. That's a whole different demographic where I may be able to attract business people by creating video content or, getting out there. But to get in front of the trucking people, that's a whole different formula where he has to go find where those people are, where they're hanging out, who are the influencers in that area. And it's just a whole different ball game for him to be able to move his product from one thing to the other. So his mindset has to be kind of in a different place where my mindset is like, okay, I know where I need to be, I know how I need to be, but of course there's still that process of getting there. But it's just, yeah, it's just so different with everything. So my struggles are going to be different than his struggles or different than your challenges or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's an awesome example. I love that because, you know, maybe the very basics of the marketing are the same, but it's a different product, a different demographic, and ultimately a completely different and unique business and person behind the business, which is
Mhm.
actually a beautiful thing because each of us are so unique. And the way that we will be successful is by digging into our own uniqueness and owning it instead of, like you said, trying to cookie cutter somebody else's approach that worked for them and their unique situation.
Mhm. Yeah, and then maybe we should talk a little bit more about the mindset when you're going through these different challenges. Like I said, I know it's a little bit different in the beginning. It seemed like that middle portion might just be the toughest one when you've actually moved your product to market and people aren't just jumping on board with it. You're going through that thing to try to get people to adopt what it is that what you brought to the world, how you shown up. You're trying to get people to adopt it. And there's such a challenge there where you're just sometimes just feeling defeated. You might be running out of capital. I always like to say it's like people always talk about a runway, but when you really think about your money being a runway, you get start approaching the end of that runway and your plane hasn't taken off. It's like, do I have to stop at this point, or you push through the barrier and then that could be catastrophic. So do you stop and go back to the beginning? It's such a different mindset where you're in that situation and you have to make decisions. What are some pointers that can help a person, going through that sort of thing? Because it's a very real thing where a lot of people will quit at that point where the runway's gone. I don't know what to do now. Do I just throw in the towel and quit? You know?
Yeah, yeah. And that's a great question, because at the end of the day, we are talking about real money and real businesses and real potential for financial loss, right? So I think, like you mentioned, for example, when somebody's at a point where they have gotten a product to market and they're not seeing the sales levels that they had perhaps hoped for,
Mhm.
um, when your brain perceives fear, and we've talked about this a few times in prior interviews, but um, when your brain is afraid, you have this kind of primitive part of your brain that's made up of the amygdala and a few other structures.
Mhm.
And this part of your brain has three jobs: to keep you safe, maintain the status quo, and expend as little energy as possible doing number one and number two. So your brain's kind of knee-jerk reaction on autopilot is to run and hide, shut down, say game over, not doing it, not worth the risk, right? Because this part of your brain is concerned with your survival in the next 5 minutes, the next 5 hours, not the health of your business in the next 5 years, right?
Right.
And so the problem with letting your brain run on autopilot like that, when you're in these situations where um, you don't have sales at the level that you want and you're not experiencing success at the level that you want, the problem with letting your brain run on autopilot at that point is it shuts down innovation, right? It shuts down the brilliance that is inside your head in favor of packing up and going home. And so as far as pointers for dealing with that, number one, I think it's really important to acknowledge that you are fearful, you are feeling stressed, or whatever other emotions are coming up, right? Because the more that we try to stuff those down and ignore them, the
Mhm.
more they kind of build and build and build until we get to a breaking point, right? So first off, just acknowledge that, yeah, this is scary. I do have capital on the line. My cash reserves are running low. Um, but once you have acknowledged and kind of processed those emotions, start getting curious. Because when you start getting curious and asking your brain to do the work,
Mhm.
um, you will be amazed at the amazing things that you come up with. So, for example, you said somebody's got a product that's not selling. Um, okay, so ask yourself, why am I not selling? What are 5 things I could do, 10 things I could do to speak more to my customer? Do I need to go talk to people? Is my positioning not the best? How can I position my product in whatever the current economic climate is? And I think that, there's a saying that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask.
Mhm.
And I think the quality of your business can also be greatly influenced by the quality of the questions that you ask
Absolutely.
yourself about your business and the direction that you want to go. So when you are facing circumstances that aren't ideal in your business, don't let your brain shut down. Ask yourself the questions. Um, Go out and talk to your people and arm yourself with information so that you can innovate. And one really great exercise that I like to do is I make myself come up with 30 answers to whatever the solution is. Like if I'm looking for new places to market something, okay, I'm going to write down 30 places that I can do that. Now, 30 sounds like a lot, and that's intentional, right? You might get to 12 and you feel like you can't possibly come up with any more. But if you push your brain to do the work, again, you'll be amazed at what you come up with.
Yes. I really like what you said there. It reminds me of what I call MacGyver it. I don't know if you remember the television show
Oh yeah.
MacGyver. He'd be stuck in some building and all he has is a paper clip and a stick of bubble gum. And somehow he creates an explosive that blows the lock apart. You know? And that's a lot of times what it's like, being an entrepreneur is having to MacGyver it. It's just figuring out, seeing where you are, what you have, because a lot of times it's easy to get fixated on, what I'm lacking, what I don't have, but then finding those things you have to say, okay, this is what I have. This is where I want to be. So how do I take this and create it into that? And then, like you say, you start thinking, and once your mind goes into that into that space, you start to think of more things that, okay, I could do this, or I could try it this way, and I could move things over this way. And you just start to figure out ways to get around those challenges that you have in more creative ways. Because if you don't, as an entrepreneur, a lot of times that is what it equals, is in game. If you don't, if you're not willing to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, I understand that this isn't flowing the way that I thought it was going to. Now I need to go back to the drawing board, like Edison, right? 1,000 times going back to that's a lot of times, right? And it's like we have a hiccup one time and we're ready to run for the hills. And, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as entrepreneurs, especially, it is important for us to just expect that we're going to fail.
Yes.
We're going to try things that aren't going to work. And what you make it mean when you fail at something, or when something doesn't go the way you wanted, it is really important. If you make it mean something negative about you, that, well, I'm just not cut out for, entrepreneurship, or, my product isn't a great product, then that's going to stop you in your tracks. If you make a failed tactic mean that didn't work, and so now I get to try something else,
yes,
that's going to keep your mindset moving forward. And it's really easy to let those negative thoughts creep in. And a lot of times they're really sneaky, right? But again, it's your brain trying to shut you down,
yes,
put you back in the cave, and run from your problems, instead of just accepting the failure and moving on to the next one.
yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I had to do to kind of keep myself going through, because I have a very, like, I'm not artistically creative, but very creative when it comes to business things. And I will try different things. It's like sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But one of the things I had to start telling myself was, I didn't fail, the formula failed. So I just need to go back to the drawing board and create a new formula. Because of, like you said, if I start looking at it as me as the failure, then I start beating myself up, then it's just downhill from there. But if I look at it as, no, you're fine, you're doing what you're supposed to do in the whole working of things, in the flow of things in the universe, you're doing what you need to do. The thing is, the formula just didn't work out, so go rework the formula.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to think about it, that it's not you failing at being a human, it's a business strategy or tactic failing.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times, especially in the online world, we're so used to seeing, you hear about the highlight reel on Facebook or Instagram. Well, businesses do that too sometimes, right? We want to position ourselves as successful and desirable, and with a market that is just churning with activity. And I think a lot of times, even as business owners, we get into this mindset of, gosh, everybody else is successful except for me. This is so much easier for everyone else and so much harder for me. Just keep in mind, even as a business owner, that what you're seeing is everybody's highlight reel. Right. And most all business owners have the exact same struggles, and you never know what's going on behind the scenes of somebody else's business unless you're intimately involved in their business. And so just keeping in mind too, that comparing yourself to somebody else's business isn't going to help you with your own self-belief and believing in your own business. Now, can you compare yourself to say, hey, that's a really neat strategy, I like that, I want to try that? Sure. But to say, gosh, this person's so much more successful than me, it's really not helpful at the end of the day. So when I'm working on my mindset, I try really hard to stay in my lane as far as looking only at my business. And when I do compare, I look at where I was 6 months ago, a year ago, right? You are your own best comparison. Yes. Are you further along than you were? Have you learned more? Have you implemented more? And so I think, as far as managing your mindset as a business owner, being really careful about who and what you compare your business to is really key as well.
Absolutely. I like to use the trail running scenario for this because I used to run trails a lot, and I just enjoyed it. But sometimes I would just have somebody come and just blow past me, on the trail. And then I would think like, oh man, am I really running that slow? I mean, literally, I've gotten run down by an old woman, but that was in that was in Boulder though. So she might have just been that fast, a lot of good runners in Boulder. But one of the things I used to think about is I would compare myself to those people without even understanding the race that they were running. I'm running 6 miles. Maybe they were just running two. Maybe they were just running one. So their speed, or maybe they've been running since they were old enough to run. They've been running ever since. So they're just that fast. But you're comparing yourself to someone without really even understanding what it is you're comparing yourself to. Like if I go start a coffee shop, right? I may have customers today and a line out the door, but somebody goes and start a car dealership, it might be just a slow trickle in, for a while. But trying to compare yourself to a coffee shop, which understanding a coffee shop has to sell a lot of cups of coffee to make that bottom line work. Whereas the car dealership can maybe sell a few cars in a month and they're good to go. But if the car dealer starts comparing himself to the coffee shop line, then you're putting yourself in a predicament where you end up defeating yourself by those comparisons. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And again, comparison is something that our brains are naturally wired to do, right? It's a survival mechanism. Am I keeping up with the other humans in my vicinity?
Yes.
So it's just a natural thing that your brain does. And nothing has gone wrong if you find yourself comparing yourself to somebody else or to another business. It's just something to be aware of and to begin to manage so that, okay, I'm going to stop looking at that coach's Instagram, for example, in my case, and focus on my own Instagram and look at where I can make improvements over what I did last month. So just another example of taking that kind of primitive toddler brain out of the driver's seat and putting your intentional thinking and mindset management in the driver's seat.
Yes. That is just so important with getting anywhere. It seems like if you can't, I can't remember, I think it was Ben Hogan, the golfer, who said that golf was a game of 6 inches. It's like, yeah, you're out there for a mile or so, but the space between your ears, your brain is the greatest asset. And if you can't get that correct, you struggle. Because so much of it comes with even like the stories we tell ourselves, kind of like you were saying earlier about how are you seeing failure? How does that, how are you programmed to read that? And a lot of times with our mindset, it's like if we can't see that story as being, okay, I am here because, let's say, I start to adopt the feeling that the universe is against me, right? Or that I can't do a certain thing, then my actions are going to follow that, right? If I don't believe it, and I think too, that's kind of a key to belief. Belief doesn't actually make a thing. It just motivates you to do a thing or not do a thing because you don't believe that it can happen. And your energy is going to go behind that belief and not make it happen. Where if you believe it can happen, then your energy goes behind that and tries to make it happen. So it's like the story we tell ourselves, especially about the future, is not necessarily true or false. So at some point, it's like you may as well just tell yourself the story you want to have, right?
Right. Yeah. And, it's funny because you might hear people who aren't into mindset management kind of criticize being positive and looking for the good in a situation and saying, oh, that's delusional. And my thought is, if I can be pessimistic, delusionally pessimistic or delusionally optimistic, why not be optimistic, right? I mean, you get to choose how you think about every single situation, every single circumstance in your business, in your life. And so why not choose to think things that serve you? Why not choose to believe things that will help you become the next amazing version of yourself and help evolve your business to its next level. I mean, you have that choice. It's 50-50.
Right. Absolutely. Now, this is really good stuff. I hope people are really taking this in because these are things that are so real for entrepreneurs. I know for myself, I've been there several times and people think I don't know if it's an area of mastery where you get to master these things because it seemed like it's more of a practice than a mastery, where you constantly have to remind yourself and bring yourself back into that state of, okay, who am I? How do I want to show up in the world? What's my mindset? What am I thinking? What do I need to be thinking to get to the next level? Right. And it's not just like it's just not a place of arrival where you just get there and stay there. It's just because life will trip you up, or situations come in life and they'll just like, oh, you thought you had it all figured out. Then it's like, here's this roller coaster for you, now it's like now you're topsy-turvy again and you're trying to figure out what do I do in this situation? And it's easy to get right back into that trap of starting to feel down about yourself, down about your vision, down about that thing that you want to accomplish in life, and being able to master, I guess you have to master the practice almost, because it's just it's not a place of arrival. It just seems like you have to keep coming back to it.
Yes, everything you said is spot on. And managing your mindset is a lot like managing your health, right? So you're not going to eat a salad once and lose 20 pounds and keep it off for the rest of your life, right? That is, like you said, it's a practice that you have to build to continually. And mindset management is exactly the same, because at the end of the day, number one, you're still dealing with your amazing human brain that has all these little survival mechanisms and processes into it that you will be working to manage and to keep your mindset moving forward. And number two, like you said, life is going to present you with new opportunities, new challenges. Things are going to come up that you haven't dealt with before. And so again, that is going to ask you to grow or ask you to stagnate. And you get to decide which direction you go. But the great thing is that every single one of those challenges is an opportunity for you to grow as a person, to get to know yourself better,
Yes.
and to evolve into the version of yourself that you really want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is even a refresher course for me, just even talking about this sometimes it helps to even bring me back. It's like you may know things in theory or you have these things, but sometimes discussing it and talking through it helps you bring you back to that place of really embodying what it means to have that type of mindset. Because like I said, it's a cycle, right? And it's like as you go through the different stages of development in your business, sometimes you just get pulled back and you're like, okay, I have to remember, like even to me, I'm starting this daily practice where I just take time and I just stop. I'm just gonna pull back and just stop doing anything. That's my meditation time. That's my time for reflection and time to just kind of center myself, see where I am, check in with myself, and make sure that I'm okay to keep moving things forward. Because I think when we don't have that time where we stop to check in with ourselves, it seems like we just set ourselves up for burnout. And it's so much easier to stop and check in than to get burnout, to reach burnout and then try to recover from that.
100%. Again, you are the engine of your business. And if you are not maintaining yourself, checking in with yourself, exactly like you said, I love your idea of having a daily practice where you just stop, check in, make sure you're okay, make sure that you're getting what you need as a human being and as a business owner. You're exactly right. You're going to end up getting burnt out. And so just doing a little bit of maintenance on yourself as the engine of your business will go a long way toward your mental health, number one, and your emotional health, which is the
Absolutely.
most important thing,
Yes.
but then also your resiliency as a business owner and your ability to lead your business in a direction that will ultimately be successful.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes, another thing I want to mention, and I know we're pushing into time here, but you seem okay and we're okay, and let's just go with it. Is one of the things when you start to program your mind to think and to manage or master your mindset, right? It's the energy you put out, not just for yourself, but what you project to other people. Like even with sending out an email, I've also often consulted people on sending out emails. I was like, wait until you're less angry before you communicate back to your client, because sometimes you may not even intentionally do it, but that feeling you have will project itself in the words. Even if you're trying to be professional, that anger will project itself in the word choices, and then you end up sending that email, and now you just put throwing wood onto a fire. And I think sometimes we're less sensitive to what we're projecting. It's like, yeah, it affects us the way we think in our mind, but subconsciously it also affects the people that we are communicating with and what we're putting out in the world. Like if you're desperate, people will see that energy. If you're whatever the case may be, it's like we have to, that mindset also, like I said, it affects the people around us as well as us.
Yeah, absolutely. Your mindset plays right into the hands of how you're showing up in the world for your employees, for your clients,
Mhm,
even for your family and even for yourself. And so just like with your example of sending an email when you're maybe a little bit upset with the client, ask yourself, how do I want to show up here?
mhm,
You know, how do I want this situation to evolve?
mhm.
And who do I have to be to facilitate that situation happening?
Yes.
And it's really easy to want that instant gratification in the moment of I'm upset and I want to get all this off my chest, but it feels really good in the short term. But
Mhm,
what does that do to your business in the long term? What does that do to you as a person in the
mhm.
long term and your relationship with this client and other employees, other stakeholders who may be aware of this situation? So just being really conscious about how you want to show up in every situation in your business, in your life, I think is a great idea to practice.
Yes. Because even then, that energy doesn't just stop with them. That energy can flow on to the next person they talk to and say, I would never work with this person because of blah, 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 blah. Word bad news travels really fast. And
Right.
people start, especially when they're passionate. That's why a lot of times it's hard to go by reviews you see on people's businesses, because it's always the most upset people are the ones who are going to go leave a review. People can be happy with you and ecstatic about your service, but those people may go out and leave a review, but the upset people almost guaranteed to leave a review. So it just kind of has this residual effect where if we sometimes stop and think, get our mindset right before we communicate out, then we can sometimes calm those situations to where that person may still end up going out and saying, you know what, I appreciate the way that they handled this sort of thing, as opposed to going out and just bashing your business.
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, every business is made up of humans, right? We're dealing with other human beings. And so just on a person to person level, I think that showing up with love when possible is really important because again, these are people. And even if a situation doesn't turn out the way perhaps you would have wanted, at least you know that you showed up as the best version of yourself you could be at that moment.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Amy, that is the last thing that I had. I didn't know if there was something else that you wanted to share with the audience today.
I think we actually covered pretty much everything that I had in mind, Eric. You asked awesome questions and the conversation just evolved in a great direction.
Great. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate your time. But as always, I want you to share with the people how they can get in touch with you, Amy Shield Coaching, and reach out. Yeah,
Yeah, of course. So my website is amyshield.com and that's SCHIELD. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram under @AmyShieldCoaching. Thank you for having me.
yeah. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Until next time, this is Galt University.